everyone. It's October 29th, 2017, and this is your episode 119 of At Percussion. With me, as usual, are Megan Arns.
Hello.
And Ben Charles. How's it going?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you, Casey?
Just fine. Yeah, of course, I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi. And Laurel is away. Where is she? She is playing Virginia a duo Tech. Recital. Yeah, that's right, Virginia Tech.
Nice.
Yeah, so she's just a few hours down the road doing a recital. So you guys, our guest today is a social activist and drummer. She is the creator of Tom Tom Magazine. Tom Tom Magazine is Brooklyn-based and the first magazine to be totally dedicated to showcasing female drummers. In an interview from 2012, our guest explains that drums require strength, courage, and assertiveness, and thus are commonly viewed as a masculine instrument. I think we can all agree with that. That's a good generalization. She then goes on to, in my opinion, very poetically say there's no reason the drums should be gendered, just like there's no reason the bass guitar should be gendered, or getting your PhD should be gendered, or being a CEO should be gendered. So I just thought that was a really beautiful statement and a good way to kind of concentrate her mission statement. And I just heard it in a little interview back in 2012. So yeah, you guys please welcome Mindy Abovitz. How are you, Mindy?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I love when people read back quotes and I'm like, wow, I said that. I love that quote.
I don't remember saying that.
Thanks for picking out a really great quote that I said that I totally agree with.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm so glad because, of course, listeners, you don't know this, but we don't run this stuff by our guests. In fact, we often run too little by our guests before recording. That's kind of a sad part about doing this every week. But yeah, I've done that with other guests as well. You know, you try to get to know someone, so you listen to an old interview or someone else has, they have an instructional YouTube video or something. And yeah, hearing a little quote repeated back again, it's, often really, really good. So, yeah.
I hate to just sort of like jump on the gender train early, but I so agree with you that like the whole like, I think in 2017, most people can see past that. But I know a lot of my female percussionist friends say that after concerts, someone will come up to them and say like, oh, I didn't know like someone is like, a petite woman like you could hit so hard or some stupid comment like that. So how do you, and most people I think are just gracious that someone was there to watch their concert and sort of do a good job at addressing it. But how do you address that when people say things like that?
I have to say that those are kind of those are some of the trickiest compliments that you can be given as a female. Is a compliment you often receive as like, oh, wow, that person really likes the way I play, or that person, thinks I'm much better than they thought I was before they saw me play. And so it's like a dig hidden in a compliment. And those are some of the most insidious comments that you can get as a female musician, female anything, because they're wrapped up so sweetly. And so they're hard to pick apart and to understand truly. And I think genuinely the people delivering those compliments have no idea that it might actually set someone back in their own minds or in their careers. But yeah, like I've gotten many of them, and almost every woman on the drums has gotten like, you're really like good, actually, or you're so much better than I thought you would be, or
they expected you to be bad for some reason.
Or yeah, like I told this story recently of just being offered drum lessons when I got to a show based on the way I look. That's it. And then I play, and then the guy's like, oh, you're actually really good. Like, you don't need drum lessons. And I was like, thanks, buddy. So it's like, yeah, it's like, thanks for the compliment, but also, I guess we all just need to think extra hard all the time when assumptions come into play. It's like how to best address scenarios to give people a chance.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you described, you've described Tom Tom Magazine as an oversaturation of female drummers, and that this is a way you're making up for lost time in history. And I thought that was really cool. Do you have a working theory as to why there have just been less female drummers out there? And I've thought to myself, like, oh yeah, certainly I know a good handful of like famous female drummers. Of course, the usual suspects come up, like Sheila E. Do you have a working idea as to like why has it been this way?
I have so many working ideas, and truly running the magazine is like getting my PhD and understanding why there aren't as many girls and women drummers and why the ones that are there don't get recognized in the same way. And Tom Tom is also like an active participant in changing the way that I think we are as a society. And I can answer in list form why I think there are less girl drummers than there are guy drummers, in my opinion, and over this like past 8 years of achieving like probably a master's degree so far in I'm trying to understand this. So unpacking it, you mentioned earlier that it takes confidence, it takes physical strength to be a drummer. You sit with your legs spread open, which has been considered unladylike. You might get sweaty. The attention's not on you primarily as a performer, as you're in the back of the band and sitting down. We mentioned physical strength. There's also many parts to a drum set, and girls are often not encouraged to build or construct at a young age, or to be proficient at things like building and constructing. And then I'm going to add a bit to it that I think most of the listeners probably know, and if they don't, that there are parts of the world where women engaging in drumming is illegal and against their religion. And that has to do with the religious power that drums have in those specific parts of the world. And women are excluded from being priests or leaders of religious practice in those communities. And so therefore it translates into touch the drum and you could potentially be imprisoned or your life could be threatened. You can be ostracized. So if we start at the point of there are parts of the world where if a woman plays the drums, she could be imprisoned. And then we kind of like step back and take it to where we are and say there's poor representation of girl drummers, or it's looked at to be a tomboy thing to do. That's the spectrum, I feel like, of what we're looking at as girls coming to the drum set. And the last thing I'll say, and I think I've probably still forgotten some other points, is just the sheer size of it. So if you're a 9-year-old girl and you imagine your body and you look at like a series of instruments that you could potentially pick up and play, you might not think of the drum set as yours just off the bat based on your body size and the kit. And that's something I'd love to work on in the future, is engineering a drum set for any bodied person, including little girls.
It's funny you say that because I was just thinking, like, as most people are starting middle school band programs, the girls are usually actually significantly bigger than the guys at like age 12. But Casey has remarked on this before, that it's funny on the classical side of things, we don't seem to have the shortage, and it's almost a female dominated field between the Evelyn Glennies and Sheila E Woos of the world, that we don't really have that issue on the classical side so much.
That's what I was going to ask about. Sorry, Mindy.
No, I'm just going to interject and say that in the marching world, it's similar. It seems to be like a 50-50, if not more girls involved in drumming in that world. But what were you going to say, Casey?
Oh, just exactly what Ben said. Just it's interesting that there would be this big of a disparaging difference on the female side of drumming, but on the female side of classical, it's very, it's much closer to equal. Yeah, that's also another interesting factor is like, whenever I do talks at universities or talk to larger groups of folks, I tend to ask if there are drummers in the room. And if they're not drummers, we go around and we talk a little bit about that. And I've heard over and over again that drumming is hard, right? Or drumming, you have to have a lot of power to be a drummer. But we all know as drummers that there's so much nuance, and like jazz and orchestral requires so much finesse and gentleness, and sure.
Like all the things that the feminine is assigned to are all assigned also to the highest practices of the drum set, which is super interesting. And many people forget about that part. They just think about the Muppet, the animal, like hitting it real hard and just being like crazy, which in my opinion is also a female characteristic. It's just not gendered to be animal, and it's not gendered to be a very proficient orchestral player on the timpanis. But like that, I just think it's interesting that people when they're, I think, in their lazy brain, in their inactive brain, their lizard brain or whatever, it's like that doesn't come intuitively to them that a girl would be able to play any range of that kind of drum.
Right. Well, you've done so much, for this field of, or this population of people, community of people, through the Hit Like a Girl contest and through Tom Tom magazine. And I love that you've almost created this new model for the female drummer by saying, like, it can be anyone. It can be anyone from all over the world, all shapes and sizes, all ages, and just like taking the gender and the age and everything out of it. I mean, well, I guess keeping the gender in it by keeping it female, but at the same time, just kind of creating a new image, because I think sometimes, there's that Facebook page. There's a Facebook page about maybe like female drummers or something, where people will post, like magazine images of female drummers, in like erotic clothing, and taking that image, kind of away and saying, like, this is offensive. And, so you're just putting this other image out there that makes it so much more comforting and inviting, I think, for younger females to pick up this instrument. Could you tell us a little bit about what, in the beginning of all of this, like what made you start all of this? And was it the magazine or the contest that came first?
It was the magazine that came first. And what compelled me to start the magazine, and sort of the fuel that I have today, still 8 years later, to work on it with such like passion and vigor, is sort of really like anger for the injustice, or like anger for the imbalance, and the desire to create a new kind of music industry and a new music scene. I've always been a feminist, and I was a riot girl when I was a teenager. And there was this moment when I was in New York City working audio at East Village Radio, where I realized that what I had been fighting for as a riot girl at 14, 15, and 16 years old, and what I had kind of assumed was still something that we were all collectively working on and would ultimately get better, had actually gotten worse. And I'm speaking directly about the music scene, just like shows and albums and bands getting recognition, and not just the drum industry, but much larger than the drum industry.
Yeah.
Hype seemed to be dedicated to bands with guys in it. And that trickled to the drum industry. I happened to be a drummer, so I focused on the drummer to put a big spotlight on what I thought was just this massive, like, ignoring of really incredible girl drummers and girl musicians. So really back then, because I was also coding for fun, I just wanted to change Google search results by using SEO and tagging and categorizing. That was all I wanted to do. Was like, anyone in the world would type girl drummer in, and they would get back a girl who drums, not a question about can girls drum, or a sexy drummer next to a drum set. I really just wanted to know the people I knew who are drummers. Like, I mean, imagine in 2009, you type in female drummer and it says the first Yahoo search result was, can girls play the drums? And then there was a whole long list of people being like, I have seen one play once. And then someone else saying, yeah, it was insane. And someone else saying, like, Sheila E's great. And then quickly people got bored of that conversation, started talking about their own drum fills and their own drum practice. And I was like, no, like, this is not reality, but somehow Google called it reality. So I wanted to fix that. And then that is just still what I work on, but just in any possible way I can, like outside the internet too.
Wow. Yeah. You mentioned, or someone mentioned, the sexy drummer girl. And I would love to, I'm very curious. Do you think that helps or hinders what you're trying to do? Because I'm always amazed to see, okay, let's just, say sexy dressed girl in skimpy outfit plays mediocre drums to Welcome to the Jungle on YouTube and has literally millions of views. Yeah. And this is a true story. And I know guys are looking at that going, wait, I could never do that. Like, this person is on their way to a career, and they play like someone in high school. It's very, very average drumming. Is this a empowering thing, or is this bad? Or is it in between?
That's amazing question. The next issue we're about to put out is themed sex and love. It doesn't touch it. We're not spending 76 pages talking about what you just brought up, which we could and should potentially in the future. But we're going to touch on that a little bit. I think that the sexy drummer, and I'm going to call her name out. She's an incredible drummer. She has like 99% of her followers are male. Maytal Cohen is like potentially like the number one drummer I can think of online who's capitalizing on the like windblown hair and the corset, like Metallica covers. I think she does a service to the larger female drummer community in that there are many guys who would otherwise never see a girl drumming, never bothered, and they fully respect her as a drummer. They also want to marry her, and they make comments about like buying her dinner and stuff. So for my personal pursuit of equality, like that's not my path, but I'm grateful that Maytal is here, and I'm grateful for the Maytals of the world to be getting this audience that I would probably never get, because I'm really, really clear about where I'm hoping we go. I want women to feel and girls to feel like they don't have to do that to get attention. So I'm providing potentially the other model of you can go the Maytal route, and then you can exercise your beauty and your sexuality to get attention, which a lot of women do, and it works. Or you can not. And that's the part that excites me the most, is being people and having skills and having something to say and not having to take your shirt off to be heard, personally.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. Thank you.
I had sort of a point for both sides of this. And we keep mentioning Sheila E., and we're going to talk about Sheila E. later today. But I came across a great quote from Sheila E., and if you know anything about Sheila E., she dresses in a rather flashy manner on stage, and there's a great quote from her. She says, "I'm not trying to sell sex, I just don't like wearing a lot of clothes on stage." But then for the sort of opposing viewpoint, this is not a musician, but have any of you ever seen the Netflix series Chef's Table? It's
heard of it,
started in 2015, and I think I found this season 1, episode 4. There's a Japanese chef named Niki Nakayama, who is a female chef, and this is just reading from the Wikipedia page on her. Her restaurant is called In Naka. It says, despite In Naka's critical acclaim, Chef Nakayama's cuisine was not always met with such positive reviews. Being a woman in the typically male-dominated world of high-end cuisine is usually difficult enough, but being a female chef in the predominantly male world of Japanese cooking gave her an additional set of obstacles, requiring her to constantly prove her abilities as a chef. While working at Azami, a Japanese man once walked in, saw Nakayama behind the counter, did an about-face, and left. Nakayama said that he thought, this can't be a real sushi restaurant or a good sushi restaurant. Due to such sexist attitudes, Nakayama has since decided to work in closed kitchens where patrons and diners cannot see her and therefore cannot take her gender into consideration when judging her cuisine. She says that it's better that the guests just focus on the food versus who's making the food. With Japanese food, it's so easy to have an idea of what your chef should look like.
Whoa.
And
wow.
Yeah, so, and it's like she totally turned the game into something not even about gender. She turned it into, this is about my restaurant, and I just want you to come in and have a good meal, and like almost refuses to talk about gender in a sense by just closing the doors in the kitchen and not acknowledging that she's female or male, which I think could be a great parallel to someone that's performing live and doing the windswept hair and low-cut top versus someone that's doing recordings where you know, quite frankly, unless it's a singer, you can't tell what the gender of the person is on a recording.
Whoa. Yeah. Wow, Ben, that's a depressing but very cool parallel.
Yeah. Also, check out Chef's Table. It's amazing.
Yeah. Wow. If I could relate one little personal story, when I was younger, I guess like this would have had to have been either late high school or my undergrad years, but I was a fan of this heavy metal group called Arch Enemy, and they have a female vocalist. But by listening, you can't really tell it's a female vocalist. It's just kind of in that growly Cookie Monster, unpitched style that they do. And yeah, being a kid, I always thought like, oh, the singer's just good. The singer's just awesome. And then finally getting like an actual CD of them and seeing like it's a girl was just, it actually made me really happy. You know, it's wow, that's so cool. I was just so glad to find that out, you know. And I don't know, I just can't imagine being disappointed to find out like the sushi that was made for me was really good, but it couldn't actually be really good because the wrong, I don't know, it's so abstract.
There's an activist who, I forget her name right now, but I read about her in Fast Company, which is a business magazine. She's created a software for hiring that eliminates gender and race and age from the applications, because there have been many studies that even based on someone's name, they can be, you know, judged and not given the same opportunities. So this particular hiring application, it sort of gloms on to whatever hiring software you're using within your company and removes any sort of biases you could have. Which I love. I mean, and but we can't live in a world like that. We can't close ourselves behind our kitchens, and we can't like only have people experience our music in recordings. I mean, we can a little bit, but like, you know, the rest of us are moving around in the world, and what I'd like to do. And if you guys have any thoughts on how we can do this together, is how do we give each other more of a chance and not come at people with assumptions all the time?
Yeah, and it's like you kind of, I think, said basically, if you know, that software shouldn't be necessary. Like, it's great that it does exist, but it also shouldn't. You know, it's frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, it is frustrating. I think the nice part about it is it will ideally illuminate an issue, but not be the problem solver. So that's also what TomTom's goal has always been. I thought we wouldn't have to be a magazine for very long. And like I mentioned, we're in our 8th year. My goal is that we become a moot point, right? Yeah. That might not happen in my lifetime, but the idea is that you illuminate these like discrepancies so that we can have good conversations and put in good practice to make it go away, not to like use as a crutch. TomTom's not meant to be here forever. Just really wanted the other drum magazines to give girls a chance, a real chance, and more of a chance than they could probably ever imagine we need or want or the industry needs. So anyhow, we're still around, and these pieces of software are being built to help people, but like we should not rely on them as crutches. And I truly feel bad for that chef that she has to hide in her kitchen. I understand her impulse, and I think she's a badass for doing it, but think about her life. Like she steps out of that kitchen and people won't dine in there.
Yeah, that's crazy. Fine.
Yeah, I love that you say, you know, I wish that this magazine, you know, was a moot point eventually. And there's actually a little chunk from my segment that I'll just pull in right now is about International Women's Day. And it's always so frustrating to me when people say, well, why is there a magazine, you know, for example, why is there a magazine about girl drummers? Why isn't there a magazine about boy drummers? Or like, why isn't there a White Lives Matter, you know, et cetera. And it's like, it exists for a reason because there is an inequality. And I found this interesting statistic from the World Economic Forum that the gender gap won't close until 2186.
Sure.
And
no, I'll definitely be gone. I had a feeling I was going to be like 90 when things...
I know. I don't think we're going to see it.
I'm totally...
Yeah, so that's the World Economic Forum. And it was... So International Women's Day... Let's see. What is this?
That's like my great-great-great-grandkids.
Isn't that crazy?
It makes sense. Progress is really slow going. And also, like, to speak on a point we brought up before, why aren't there more girl drummers? Like, initially, I thought it was all about marketing and visibility, which is why TomTom was like, you know, I was like, I'm going to oversaturate the internet. I'm going to like show everyone we're here. But in reality, it's much deeper than that. And I think there are true religious and historical like stakes in the ground that will keep girls away from power. And there's power in music, in movement, and spirituality. Yeah. So so long as those things are dominating, and they are right now, it will be an uphill battle. And I'm like, I am. And also, we don't have to go that far. We can look at our own government. And there was in my opinion, a massive setback almost a year ago. And we'll have to recover from that. Female drummers will have to recover from our president. So it's like, any female doing anything has to like come out from under the fact that we elected somebody who openly sexually harasses women and degrades them in the workplace and everywhere else. So that's just like, okay, that's here. So of course, did you say 2186?
2186. And the parameters that they're on here, it says figures show that globally women's education, health, and violence towards women is still worse than that of men. And so those are kind of, what they're gauging this number off of. But like you said, it's all related and it's all,
Not
built
to be
around
grim. I hope we don't get this grim at any other point in the show, but I'm reading Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit right now. And if you want to be like bummed out, read that book. There's a quote in there about the leading cause of death in pregnant women is their partners. And like that's there's a lot in there. There's a lot to unpack in there, but like also the leading cause of violence for women is men. Like, you're gonna get hurt, it's gonna be by a guy, not by heart failure. So there's a lot in there too. There's a lot of shifting we have to do mentally about power and fear and communication that we're far away from. So maybe by 2186 we'll be able to all kind of see each other for what we are and not and not feel threatened by each other. I think.
Yeah.
I have a question related to this. Do you think that in the field of music, I think that it's safe to say most actual musicians, not music spectators, are more forward-thinking, progressive people? And also, I feel like most musicians have the utmost interest of music at heart. In other words, like a blind audition, whoever's the best player will be the winner. Do you think that musicians are ahead of the curve on this?
I hesitate to make any generalization about anything. I'd like to say that if I was to make a generalization, I'd say that maybe musicians are on a whole more empathetical. They have like maybe a bit more emotive nature about them, and obviously some creative parts of their brains are open. But there are plenty of people, in male and female, who are musicians who I think are terrible people. So I don't know how to say generally musicians have it like figured out, because I don't think we do per se. But I mean, if I had to pick a group of people to spend the rest of my life with, it would be drummers. So there's intuition there. I love drummers. I feel like we are a certain breed of people, and that's partially nurture and partially nature. So I think that as a drummer, you learn to behave a certain way over time, which makes us awesome. And so even if you're not awesome by nature, by nurturing, by being a drummer, you're probably pretty cool.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's just interesting to me because I exist basically solely in the sort of classical university setting. And when I think about classical music auditions, there's always a screen, there's always carpet, so you can't tell the person's shoes. Universities are, I think you can tell the gender of the person, but I think that it's generally very fair who gets the job. And, you know, we have people like Megan and Laurel teaching at universities. I haven't been in that sort of pop studio environment where, you know, people, I think, have a tendency to be slimy about things more.
Yeah, I'm in New York City, and I've been around, you know, through the magazine. I've also kind of become this like manager person of people's careers, and also getting people jobs and being a liaison between jobs and drummers. And it's totally, it mirrors the Weinstein stuff in a lot of ways. Yeah. Like someone has power and they want something, they might abuse that power to get it. And so, if you look at my Facebook feed, you'd see a lot of Me Too's that are about the music industry, actually.
Yeah.
And I still think we're probably a better crew of people, but it isn't I mean, my magazine is about our community. So started it because there's a discrepancy here in the drumming world. So drummers are amazing, but we are just like everyone else. We are part of this society, and we forget to question biases and assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
When you mentioned that you feel like with the recent election we took a step back, just want to tell you that you echoed something Michael Spiro said, which I guess was a few episodes ago at this point when this is released. But yeah, he said the same thing about, being arrested in the civil rights movement and all the stuff that he thought they were standing up for. It seemed like it's just suddenly like, no, by the way, people are willing to elect a person who openly admits to sexually molesting people, and like they're just okay with that. It's just absolutely crazy. I've thought, and you mentioned the book you were reading that's quite depressing. Listening to Men, or Men Explaining.
It's Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit. She's an excellent writer. I just this is my entry point to her. She wrote The Field Guide to Getting Lost and Wanderlust, and they're really academic books. This is a collection of essays, literally about men explaining things to her in her field, which is literature. But then she intersplices these like statistics that are, like I said, depressing about stuff. But I wanted to speak to when our president got elected, a lot of people said to me how great this opportunity is now for me and for Tom to galvanize with all the other people who now want to support women and who see like how dire of a time it is. Now, I happen to hold the exact opposite opinion of those people. I don't see this as an amazing opportunity. I was not sleeping and now I'm woke. Like, I've been working on this stuff for a long time. I've been feeling it for a long time. And this to me feels like a massive setback. Although there are a lot of people who maybe were asleep at the wheel and didn't realize that they have passions and they want to work on things, and him getting into office was a wake-up call for those folks because they just assumed everything was okay. I've known things are not okay, and him being in office makes it worse for me. So I'm in that camp.
Yeah. It's kind of refreshing to hear you say that, because I feel like on like the sunniest days in my mind, I'm like, maybe this is a good thing. But like the world, is so big and our community is so small that, the big community is what matters. We all get one vote and that's what dictates what happens. And so I think, maybe it's an opportunity for people to rally together, but it's too long of a time for that to happen, because too many big things are going to be put into place or are being put into place that are going to take years. That 2186, I feel like, has been moved back significantly.
Yeah, I wonder if the next time they meet, they'll say, oh, yeah, Trump set us back by like 67 years or something.
Right, exactly. And like, we don't get to be alive during that time. That sucks.
Yeah, but we do get to do really good work in this lifetime, and maybe we get to like pull a Malcolm Gladwell and like do some crazy shift that no one was expecting and change everything way sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Well,
to change topics just a teeny bit, can you tell us a little bit about the drumhead I keep seeing in all your videos? You have this drumhead that's very distinct and it has all these colors. They're these short little color brushes. And I noticed I've seen it on various people you've interviewed and other people you've had on the Tom interviews. And yeah, what's up with that drumhead?
Shout out to all of our moms. So my mom has been a really big supporter of the magazine since I started it, and she's a painter. So what she started doing in 2009 was whatever drumsticks I'd left at her house, she painted them.
Cool.
She's an incredible painter. She's been painting my whole life, but she's a teacher by trade. And that's how she got us through school and everything. And so she's actually never had her work exhibited in a way that I feel like she's deserving of. And I'm not sure if that was the reason why I approached MoMA PS1 to do, like, in part, to do the oral history of female drummers, the first performance of that project that I do. But when they said yes, I knew it was the opportunity to bring my mom's artwork into a museum. Mm-hmm. So my mom has then and since painted the drum heads for every performance of the oral history of female drummers that I've done in the Brooklyn Museum, Perez Art Museum, Miami, MoMA PS1, and others. And so the way that her work is incorporated into the project is her painting on our drum heads, to me, represents the generation before mine, where the idea of being loud and being seen and making your mark in history was even less possible. And so what we do is we take my mom's work, and throughout the course of the performance, we're playing the head and affecting its paint and moving it around and changing its picture and being really loud. And then at the end, and the end result is we have this like visible marking of our generation and what we're capable of doing with her story.
Wow.
So she continues to paint the drum heads, and she'll continue to do that for me. And she loves it. I mean, she paints sticks all the time, just constantly like, send me more sticks. So I send her sticks and she paints them. It's like, and she bejewels and bedazzles the tip of the sticks, even though I've told her like hundreds of times that's where we play them. She's just like this rebellious, like incredibly creative human being that I can't put in a box. But yeah, so that's thanks for bringing that up. Thanks, Mom. She's going to love this part.
Yay.
Yeah, she's the best. And that's how that happened. And it's also a really beautiful way of tying all the drummers in, because in these pieces, the drummers can't see or hear each other. I spread them out throughout the museum so that they have a kind of solitary experience, like I think most of us female drummers do. And then this snare head brings us all together. And I think when they're playing it, they know they're part of a larger project and a larger community, which is that of Tom Tom.
Cool. I saw it just enough that I thought, okay, this thing means something. This is significant. I keep seeing it in these different places. And by the way, you guys can see this oral history of female drummers on YouTube. There's cool documentation of it. And yeah, please check that out. Well, I thought I would change topics just a little bit to give Mindy a rest and do a What's the Sound that I've had loaded up for, I guess, about 3 episodes now.
Yes.
So you guys have been properly hinted, at least my co-hosts have been properly hinted. The hint is Nancarrow, as in Conlon Nancarrow, and Walt Disney. So here you go. Okay, every time I thought I played enough, there was like an upcoming thing. I thought like, oh wait, we just have to hear this, just have to hear that. So I don't know. Do you guys have any idea what that might have been?
Player piano?
Yeah, it sounds very sort of mechanical instrument-ish.
Very good, very good. And of course, yeah, Conlon Nancarrow, that's a very, very good call. So this is a piano MIDI realization of the song Let It Go from Disney's movie Frozen.
Yeah.
Okay, which is probably why it like, to us, like, oh yeah, that rings a bell. I've heard that somewhere, but I don't actually know it because we're not, 8 years old. So you may notice that there were some extra crazy sounds and some extra heavy dissonances in there, and maybe even some extra special effects like little laser sounds here and there. Well, that's because the creator or arranger, I really don't know what to call these types of people, creator/arranger. This person's name is Andy Kim. That's their YouTube channel. Has a MIDI realization of the song, except he or she has totally saturated it with extra notes. So there's tons of extra MIDI notes, and the internet has deemed this as something called black MIDI. MIDI because, like you guys said, it's mechanical. It has to be something automatic. MIDI because it's so far only possible through MIDI playback. And black MIDI because there are so many extra notes caked on top of the original tune that the sheet music just looks ridiculous. It just looks like ink smeared everywhere. So the one I just played from you is from 2014 and actually has very few notes by comparison to what else is out there now. As computers get stronger, obviously more notes can be added. And nowadays it seems like people build these pieces just to basically show off their computer hardware. So if you look up black MIDI on YouTube, you'll find all sorts of things. People with, I think they've hit 1 billion MIDI notes now. But I like this example much better because you can tell when you watch the video, the computer kind of chokes on the notes. It has this delay as it gets to a giant cluster of black MIDI. It's moving along fine, and then the cursor just chokes over all the notes, and you get this extra delay effect. So it's almost as if the guy is composing the tune with these special effects in mind, and it requires the computer to be kind of not able to handle it.
Yeah.
So yeah, nowadays, in my mind, it's kind of a short movement. Like I almost think the movement is over. It was really cool then when the computers couldn't handle it, but now that they can handle it, I don't think it's interesting at all. And I thought I would do a quick experiment. I thought I would go on my computer and see what it would take to make my version of Finale choke on some notes, and you guys, I couldn't do it.
Really?
Yeah, I filled my screen with staves, and I loaded it all on the same MIDI channel. And of course, if I had used samples, it could have easily choked. But MIDI data, of course, as you know, is not a sample. A sample is an actual wave file. It's a much bigger file, and it's much harder to play back. So that would have been way easy to make it choke. But making it choke with MIDI notes, I could not do. And I had, I had a page full. I put tone clusters, just big clusters on every staff, and then I just started copying and putting them on top of each other as much as I could. And you need thousands before it will start even hiccuping, and I just couldn't get it to hiccup. And I thought, oh man, I'm not going to go any further with this. And
Casey, are you still practicing these days?
What's that? No, all I do is this damn podcast. That's like all I do. It's like the only thing I have time for.
Podcasts and MIDI files and emails. I was going to say, what I really enjoy, you were saying you enjoy like how the computer kind of chokes up on it. I like watching the player pianos that, I don't remember where this was that I saw a player piano, but just play things where the keys are just zipping up and down, or like really fast splits between high and low things. It's just like things that a human being couldn't do sounds so cool on a player piano.
Yeah.
Yeah, and bringing up Nancarrow, the cool thing about this is it's parallel to Nancarrow, who, of course, you guys know Ben did a great segment on many episodes ago about his use of player pianos and irrational rhythms and all the things he would do there. But of course, he first was doing this with piano rolls, giant glissandi rhythms, giant canonical ratios, drawing shapes, and even spelling words in the scrolling piano rolls. So Nancarrow really took advantage of what piano rolls could do that, of course, humans could not. Like Black MIDI compositions, the speeds and quantities of notes in Nancarrow's piano roll pieces would yield effects and timbres that are completely alien to what we're used to hearing from the typical instrument in its form. Just like you're not intended to hear the computer choke on that many MIDI notes, but you end up with these interesting effects. Wikipedia has a little entry about this. And it seems totally right to me. It says, though Nancarrow and Black Midi are unrelated in origin, the concept of impossible piano existed long before Black Midi, manifesting itself with Conlon Nancarrow's work, involving player pianos where he punched holes in the piano cards, creating extremely complex musical compositions in the same impossible, unplayable spirit of Black Midi. So that's fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
It almost reminds me of, like, I guess, a typewriter, you know, like the most physical thing I feel like I've experienced to that would be like a typewriter, you know, where you're typing and the keys get stuck.
Yeah, totally. Right. Like the technology has this barrier. And again, of course, I don't think people are really fascinated with it in the same way that I found this example fascinating. But it's just really neat. You know, Nancarrow had access to player pianos. All these composers today, they have access to their computers and all these MIDI tools, and it's just neat that people will be creative, like, no matter what, you know? Yeah. Ben, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, so since we have someone that has this magazine primarily about female drummers, I wanted to talk about, I think, maybe my favorite female drummer who we've mentioned already a couple of times, and this is Miss Sheila E, who was born as Sheila Cecilia Escobedo on December 12th, 1957, in Oakland, California. Her father was a musician named Pete Escovedo, who played with a guy named Santana, along with his brother in that same group. And her godfather was Tito Puente, who you might have heard of. So obviously some pretty powerful musical influences around her at a very young age. I think she said she started playing at 3 years old. And she grew up surrounded by Latin jazz, R&B, funk, and pop, in addition to many other styles, which, if you know anything about Santana, there was definitely a sort of Latin rock influence as well. She began her professional career in the mid-1970s as a percussionist and singer in the George Duke Band. Around the same time, she also performed with Herbie Hancock, Diana Ross, Marvin Gaye, and Lionel Richie. She met Prince in 1978, and from what I understand, Prince had actually been following her career before then, and Prince was just immediately taken back by her, and he sort of took her under his wing, and she recorded on Prince's Purple Rain album in 1984, and she is a singer as well as a percussionist, and I think on Purple Rain she might have only sang, but she might have played drums too, I'm not sure. She began her solo career as well in 1984 with her album called The Glamorous Life, which the title track to that album, The Glamorous Life, was a #1 dance hit. She worked with Prince as a musical director and drummer on his tour from 1987 to 1989. The two even became briefly engaged, although it sounds like they broke it off before they got married. And in 1989, she left Prince's sort of organization to focus on her own solo career. She released one of the best album titles, I think, in 1991. She released an album called Sex Symbol, but it's spelled symbol like Zildjian symbol, which is great. Unfortunately, about this time, she began developing some severe health issues, primarily related to playing drums in heels for so long. And she had a collapsed lung, and she became semi-paralyzed for a couple of weeks, and it took her 4 months of therapy to learn to walk again. And it seems like in this time she might have taken somewhat of a hiatus from playing because there weren't any albums released or notable singles or anything like that. But she is still playing and has begun playing again since then. She's performed with Ringo Starr and his All-Star Band in 2001, 2003, and 2006 on tours. She was featured in 2011 as part of Dave Letterman's Drum Solo Week. She's recorded 7 solo studio albums. And this is one of the coolest things I found. She performed in Hans Zimmer's drum orchestra on Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, which if you go on YouTube and you type Hans Zimmer drum orchestra, you can find this great clip of they have one session with 10 drummers and one session with 12 drummers where they just got 12 of the best drummers in LA and put them all in a room together and just kind of observed what happened. It's amazing sounding. She's also an honorary member of the Tau Beta Sigma music sorority, which I am as well, in recognition of her humanitarian efforts through and in music. And then so that's sort of where I stopped my research. And then when I came back to it later, I came across the fact that she has a biography. And I read a little bit about her biography, and then it made me look so much more into her as just a human being outside of a musician. She came forward and she said that she was sexually abused at the age of 5, and she said she didn't know it at the time, but now looking back, she realizes that music was a great tool in helping her move beyond this abuse and heal her wounds. And so, largely because of her experiences growing up, she created a foundation called the Elevate Hope Foundation in 2001 to provide support and resources to abused and abandoned children through music therapy and the arts. And then she's also involved in an organization called Elevate Oakland, which is a partnership between the Elevate Hope Foundation and 51 Oakland, which is dedicating to providing arts and music education resources to students in Oakland. And if you go on her website, there's a little video about this, and it just seems like in addition to being a badass musician, she is just a genuinely wonderful person. And I know she was featured on the cover of Tom Tom magazine. So Mindy, if you could tell us about your experience of working with her.
Well, I'm going to say that when you talk about a female drummer, if anyone can remember a name of a female drummer, it's always Sheila E. So in the same, like, she's an incredible drummer. Her and Cindy Blackman are the two drummers that have sort of like transcended gender. And that's awesome. But also she has had to, like you said, doll up over the years and wear heels and wear corsets. And she was actually the cover of our Glamour issue, which of course was an intentional decision on our part to have our drum magazine have a theme titled Glamour, because no other drum magazine would do that.
Right.
We put her on the cover because she's very glamorous, but also because she's Sheila E. And like, no one can touch her.
She's, and speaking of which, like, she's almost at the end of this year, she's going to turn 60. And speaking of glamour, she looks amazing. I mean,
yeah, she looks amazing. But like, I think what we were talking about before, the duality of like, do you get the attention for being a player? Do you get the attention for being a female? I think she's done both throughout her whole career. She's probably recognized that in order to get to where she needed to go back then, she was going to have to play it up. Although if she hadn't, she probably would have the same career. So I can't say we can't take back time, but she comes from this legacy, like you mentioned. I haven't read her biography yet, but I'm looking forward to it. We've reviewed it in the magazine by our review team. And I've met her several times. She's an incredibly generous, talented human being. And I mean, I look at her as like a canon in my industry because she stands for so many things. She is female drummer. You say female drummer and Sheila E. And that's one and the same for many, many people who, because gender can't be removed just yet, she is the female drummer. So that's a really like incredible gift she's given the rest of us women, the opportunity to play. Many, many, many girls will say, if it weren't for Sheila E., or women, if it wasn't for Sheila E., they wouldn't be playing. So it's like, she's just this like, she's an incredible person. And it's hard for me not to also mention Cindy Blackman, who gets a lot of the same credibility. It's a two-sided compliment when people say like, oh, you're in a magazine about female drummers, you know, like Cindy Blackman is incredible. Like, she isn't even a female to me, is what many people have said to me about like Cindy or Sheila, like that they transcend gender, which is an amazing thing and also a backhanded insult. But I mean, I think she's incredible. She's judged Hit Like a Girl, which is how I got to meet her. I have her number in my phone, and so that's like how I get to roll in my life.
Yeah.
And her, Evelyn Glennie, Susie Ibarra, and Cindy, and like 30 other women are like what I think of as the temple of female drummer. So I go to them to understand what their lives were like and as our role models moving us forward.
And on the topic of role models, I've never seen this on a website ever before, and I thought this was just the nicest thing. On Sheila E.'s website, if you scroll to the bottom, it says, if you would like an autographed picture, please send like a self-addressed stamped envelope to such and such address. And I can't imagine like how many middle school girls like write to her and get that picture and put it on their wall, and it's just like the highlight of their middle school life. I think that's the coolest thing.
I mean, she's got like a load of guy fans. Like she's like the Maytal Cohen. She's like the one there's several who've crossed over into the world of like, they are drummers. So that Sheila, I think Phil Hood, who runs Drum Magazine, told me that the most read article on Drum's website is about not Sheila, but Cindy and Carlos getting married. And like, that was breaking news for Drum. And if you think about that, they don't really make an effort to particularly cover girls and women. So they just happen to, like, they're looking at their SEO and they're like, wow, this one almost broke our internet. And this is about Cindy, which is cool. You know, like, it's just cool. It's just cool. Like they've both got the majority of their fan base are guys, I think, actually.
Yeah, it's easy to believe. I don't see why not. I mean, I know I grew up lucky. I mean, I'm the youngest of a family of 5 kids, 3 older sisters and an older brother. And I mean, yeah, it just never, I don't know, it just never crossed my mind that, you know, that Evelyn Glennie is a female, Cynthia Ye is a female, Annika Niles is a female. Like, it just never, it's about skill. It's not about, I don't know. Exactly. It must be really weird to, and yet I have run into the old dudes at PASIC or whatever. It's like, the Kaisha Trio, you really want to go hear some ladies play? Like, I have heard that. But, man, yeah, not like by anybody.
Basically, like, stay out of the YouTube comments section.
Well, kind of. I mean, I think I don't know. I have seen that before, but not by anybody younger, 50 years old, literally, you know, I mean, myself. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way, Casey, and I think, you know, as a female drummer, I ignore, but I'm also extremely lucky to not have had a lot of issues or have been able to be kind of oblivious enough. And my best friend Amy and I have this conversation all the time, and I think she and I have both become much more identifying as feminists now, not because we were, you know, thought that we were treated in a wrong way or something as female drummers growing up, but because we've heard the stories of so many other women, and now we understand the responsibility to stand up for those women or you know, or those people. And it's almost irresponsible. It is irresponsible to say that there's no issue, or for me to pretend like it's not an issue or that there's an inequality, because it definitely exists.
And we talked about tokenization on, oh God, which episode was that? Maybe a couple months ago, of, you know, we want more females involved in PAS. Well, it sounds weird because you're just saying you want more females for the sake of, you know, your gender equality rap sheet. It's like, you're not really that interested in it if that's the way you're putting it. So I think I very much grew up like Casey, not really even thinking about the fact that Evelyn Glennie was a female or anything like that. But I think also that for someone in a minority to look at an Evelyn Glennie, or if you're gay to look at a Gary Burton, or if you're black to look at a Josh Jones, it's like, to see someone that looks like you, or that, you know, has some similarity with you, that has been successful in a field where not as many people have been successful, I think is a really powerful statement.
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about like something that ends up getting glossed over, and I think is a slippery slope, is that, like, I've often heard the argument that if she's good enough, we'll put her in the magazine, or if she's, you know, good enough, I'll play with her. And what I think I'm trying to do within Tom Tom is to also illuminate the fact that oftentimes girls get to the drum set later, or women get to the drum set later, or it's not a competition. Like the music that the music world I've been a part of is not the same as your guys's. It's mostly like playing in the backs of clubs and like touring in band, you know, like I'm in just this like kind of crusty, thrown together punk and like indie music scene. And in that scene, anything goes. I mean, you should feel like you can play regardless if you're the best, or if you're on your way to being the best, if you've had any lessons at all. It's like, I'm part of a movement of musicians that we just plug in and you play. And you know, my friends in Matt and Kim are wildly popular, and they both were exploring their instruments for the first time in Matt and Kim, in their first album that blew up their careers, and all they do is play music now. So it's like, I'm trying to kind of like find out the concentrate of that. Like, how do we instill the confidence in all of us to feel like we can play music at an early age as possible, and to remove the competitive nature of, I'd play with her if she's good enough, because oftentimes we've had a setback that we don't communicate or that isn't known. And often that's like all the things I was saying before, like reasons girls don't find themselves at the drum kit earlier, right? So, and other folks, whoever, like Black people and queer people might not step forward to something because they're having an internal battle based on some untouchable insecurity that we've, as a society, given to them. So so my dream is that we're not going for like the magazines filled with just the best drummers, but also drummers who are filled with passion or who stand for bigger stories or who are role models for the next generation, so that we can really get to that place where we can say we're putting the best of the best in the magazines, because we're not starting at like all at the same starting point, if that makes sense. Like the finish line is much closer to people who don't doubt anything to begin with. I don't know if this metaphor is coming across, but like lots of us don't get to start the race until way later. And so if we're just going to say the winners are going to get attention and are going to get the jobs or are going to get on the cover of magazines, then we're really going to just leave out loads of people. Right. By practice.
Yep.
Well, and you mentioned in one of those interviews about just expanding awareness. And I think you even gave some metrics, like people think, and the survey question, how many drummers in bands are female? And the common response, like the thinking is like 8% right now is what everyone thinks. And you're trying to up it to 30% within the next, I think it was 30% within the next so many years. And then eventually your long-term goal is 60%. So it's not so much about just showcasing the best, like you said, but it's also about just saying like, hey, women play drums too.
Women play music. Like, how much better would this world be if just more of us were playing music, regardless of gender? Like, if we just upped the amount of musicians, we're all being more creative and coming together with its universal language and, relaxing and meditating through this incredibly creative experience. And I want to gift that to as many more people as I possibly can. And I happen to be female, so I feel like that's a really easy, like, entry point for me. But within the magazine, like you're mentioning earlier, Meg, like I'm hoping to open it up to people of all ages and races and creeds and ability levels. Ability level is big, and then sexuality and all the things. Because I just think we're going to be in a better world if people can express themselves musically.
I agree. So much. It's hard, I think, for us at the university. We're teaching people to be professional musicians, and I think that I've realized my mission so much more outside of that, not outside of that, but even alongside of it is to teach people how to teach music, and to teach people how to love music, but also how to teach people how to love music or encourage people to love music, because not everyone that I'm going to teach is going to become a professional player. I mean, some of them aren't even going to be, using music as 100%, making their 100% of their income from teaching music. And I think, I think the wider mission in general for a lot of us could be to encourage more people to make music, or teach students how to encourage people to make more music.
Same. I just want to make people feel like they can make music, because I know what that experience feels like. And I've never been at the university level of playing drums, but I've been playing consecutively now for almost 20 years, and it's so fun. And it's such a relief. And people are like, wow, you're an incredible drummer. And that seems crazy to me that people would say that. But more importantly, it's how I feel when I play and what I feel like in my practice space with my bandmates, which is the experience that I wouldn't give up. Like, I don't care really how good I am at the drums. I want to be good so I can play more and play with different people and express myself. But I had fun when I was starting, and I was terrible. people didn't want to see me play, I was having a blast, like.
I think that's when we enjoy it more, actually.
Right? It's just like, what's this? I'm playing. And you're not thinking about stuff. You're just playing, right? You're like, I'm making sounds. Wow. That's the stuff that I want everyone to be able to do. And so so to mention Hit Like a Girl, so it's a contest that I started with Phil Hood from drum and Dave Levine from TRX and CRX cymbals. And it's funny because if you know me, that the exact opposite thing that I would do would be to set up something competitive. But I did so intentionally for several reasons. The industry is obsessed with the best. So we're talking about proficiency and like who's the best. So that and illuminating to the industry that there are incredible drummers all over the world, coupled with there are obviously loads of girls who want to be the best. So like in combination of those two things, I wanted to present this platform with Phil and Dave that allowed girls to be competitive in this industry.
Yeah,
I miss being in bands myself. I actually started much more on that end of things. Punk rock band, ska band, all through middle school, high school, and early college, then cover band. And yeah, it was just a blast. Drum set is really my first percussion place. Fun fact. But Megan, do you have a little topic for us today?
I do have a little topic. I just kind of wanted to tie together our last guest last week was Patience Mujeri from Zimbabwe, and she's one of, just to tell Mindy a little bit about her, she's one of the few female traditional musicians in Zimbabwe, because traditionally that would be a man's role. And you were talking earlier about how religion and social constructs might encourage or discourage women from being musicians, especially professional musicians or musicians who are allowed to participate in ceremonies that exist in these cultures. And so Patience's story is interesting because it was actually the spirits and the ancestors who were calling for her to play. So, socially, her brothers and the men in the ceremonies were saying, you can't play because you're a woman. And she would say, okay. And then eventually there was a point where she says that the spirits were calling her back to play. And that's what allowed the men to allow her to play.
No, I'm just kidding.
What?
She found a loophole.
Yeah, right. There's a loophole. But anyway,
I'm going to say that too. The spirits.
Yeah, to tie our visit with Patience and your work with the magazine and the contest into this nonprofit organization called Tariro, which is an organization in Zimbabwe. It's spelled Tariro. It's a nonprofit organization, grassroots organization. And it's working to prevent the spread of HIV/AIDS by educating young women and girls in Zimbabwe. And it's a 501c3 organization in the United States, and in Zimbabwe, it's run as a trust. So there are efforts happening in both countries. And it was founded in 2003 by two alumni from Mount Holyoke College, Memory Bandera and Jennifer Kiker. And Jennifer was my advisor for my ethno thesis. And she's an amazing person. I hope we can have her on the podcast sometime, but she works closely with this organization still. And young women are at the highest risk for contracting HIV in Zimbabwe. And however, many nonprofit organizations in Zimbabwe that are helping trying to prevent HIV/AIDS, that many of these organizations focus on younger children, and the teenagers are kind of left out. And in Zimbabwe, you have to pay for school. So public school is not free like it is here in the United States, but you have to pay. And the unemployment rate is also very high, 92%. So it makes it very difficult. It's not always common or a given that people would be, that teenagers would be going to school. And so, yes, and even if they start school, finishing school is another story. So Tariro subscribes to Nelson Mandela's assertion that, quote, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, unquote. So what they do is they sponsor teenage girls and for a comprehensive range of services that might be paying their school fees, the students' school fees, exam fees, purchasing uniforms and supplies for them, sanitary things for them to wear, And they also make textbooks available through a lending library. And I was talking to patients about this organization, trying to learn more about it, and found that actually one of her brothers who passed away, she took on his children, and one of those girls was sponsored through Tariro, so she was able to actually attend school. So currently they're supporting 32 girls, 12 are in tertiary institutions, 1 is at a special school, 2 are in primary school, and 18 are in secondary school. And they're hoping that they can support 10 additional girls this year. This report was from 2016, so I'm not sure what actually happened this year yet. But over the years, they have helped to drive gender equality by educating and empowering the girl child in high-density suburbs of Harare, which is the capital of Zimbabwe. I just want to read this paragraph from their kind of mission on their website. Tariro's work with Zimbabwean girls emphasizes the importance of women's education as an effective response to the AIDS epidemic. Young women in communities affected HIV/AIDS in Zimbabwe are in jeopardy of dropping out of school due to lack of financial resources, putting them at a high risk of contracting HIV. Education can reverse this negative cycle, since attending school dramatically reduces the risk that young Zimbabwean women will become infected with HIV/AIDS. By educating young women, Tariro empowers them to build a future free from poverty and disease. And so I think music is also a part of this. Jennifer is an mbira player, so I'm sure that music is incorporated in this as well. Although it's not physically a school, it's, basically supporting individual students to go to various schools. So they've got a website that you can check out if you want to learn more about this organization. It's a WordPress site, but if you just Google Tariro, Tariro, Hope and Health for Zimbabweans Orphans, you can find out more information. They've got a blog with updated information about current projects and things like that. Also, just a lot of great issues about great writings about current topics in Zimbabwean issues. And there's a nice post about International Women's Day that I posted before, and kind of how Tariro helps try to play into that. So you should check it out. Have any of you guys heard of this organization before I brought it up?
No, thanks for sharing it with us, Megan.
Yeah, of course. And I would also curious to ask Mindy, if you know of other organizations like this in the United States, but also really how can we help? How can we spread, in addition to spreading the word about your magazine, what can we do in our own communities to help your mission?
Tariro, in your own communities, I guess, just in the larger sense, to stop yourself before you make an assumption about somebody and maybe ask a question and listen. And then directly relating to our community, I would say encourage a girl to play the drums and listen to her. If she says something like, oh, no, I can't, some kind of just don't kind of take no for an answer, and get some more girls playing music by any means necessary, I think would be the direct relationship to the magazine. But outside of that, I feel like the organization that you brought up sounds incredible. And there are lots of organizations that educate girls around the world. And then we're really driven I'm really magnetized to those groups.
Mm-hmm.
You just mentioned, you just mentioned, and you can say encouraging things to, say, a girl that wants to play drums. And it occurred to me how many times we have to tell students, okay, you're doing this wrong, do it like this. Oh, you didn't practice this enough, you need to do it like that. And there's so much, I don't think we ever say, no, you can't do that, but we're often saying you have to do better, and this is harder than you think, and you got to practice longer, and you got to do this technique. And I guess something to be aware of that just occurred to me is make sure when we're communicating those things, don't say, this isn't happening because you can't, or because you are a girl, or because you are a boy, or because, I wonder if someone who is self-conscious about that, maybe that's what they might think. They might think, oh, no one else is having these problems, and I wasn't able to play page 1 of Stick Control at the tempo my teacher said, and maybe that's because I'm a girl. And I wonder if there's a way to say like, hey, you didn't play your page of stick control like you were supposed to, but it's not that you can't. You totally can. Of course you can.
I mean, generally speaking, like this idea that like one gender could be better at something than another, I don't really believe in. So like, I think you're absolutely right in that the boys, I would assume, need encouragement as well, like as the girls do in your class. Like if something's difficult for someone, it's really easy for all of us to be like, I suck. That inner dialogue of like, I just am bad at this and I should give up. I think that once a girl makes it to your program, that's a really good sign. She's probably gone through a lot to get there, and she's in a safe place with you guys at the school. So, but I definitely like will echo encouraging people, like all of us. We all need encouragement that we're doing a good job, and if we're told, okay, you need to push yourself a little harder, that at the same time it comes with, and also great work so far. Those are the way, I think.
Yeah, sure. Well, speaking of someone who went to my program, we have a question from Marcia McCants this week. She's a recent JMU grad, and she would like to know, this will probably be a great way to close out the episode. Marcia wants to know, as a female percussionist in a very male-dominant field, how difficult was it to find your space/niche? And do you have any tips on how to get yourself out there?
Well, I'm going to share this answer with Megan. So, I mean, how I would probably answer that would be, I would try to echo some of the voices that come through TomTom, because I play a lot less now. And also I have the privilege of knowing lots and lots of stories. So I would just say, what was the first part of the question?
How to find your niche in a male-dominated field.
I know loads of women who go the woman drummer route, and there's absolutely no shame in that. There's a lot of jobs in that part of the industry. So if that is something that you're comfortable doing, like playing up the fact that you have a gender and it's female, a good friend of mine plays in an all-girl band that's really big and popular in tours. So you can use that. And if for whatever reason or every reason you're not interested in playing up your gender, I would say be as vocal and confident about the fact that your gender doesn't have anything to do with it as you possibly can be. And don't be afraid of talking about your gender as it comes into play, feels like it's getting in the way of your career. Be vocal about it to whoever's in your way. And also, if you don't find any support or a safe space there, take it to the TomTom page, take it to your own web page, communicate with your friends and your family. Like I know also drummers who didn't get big jobs because they're women. So both of those, like, it's what we were talking about before. So I guess wherever your comfort zone lies, you can, and then after that, I'd say we're all drummers, and we're always all drummers to begin with. So work really hard, get really good, figure out what genre you're most interested in, what you're most passionate about, where you can put like 10 to 20 to 40 years of your work into. And if you find out what you won't get bored doing, just focus on that and work really, really hard in that avenue. And I think you'll be successful. So find what you're interested in, and then I'll let Megan pick up from here.
Well, I would just add to that also to surround yourself with people that support you and also people that challenge you. Because there are, as we've mentioned several times on this podcast, our community is just filled with wonderful people. And I think even though it's a male-dominated field, a majority of the males, at least in my community, in my circle, are extremely supportive and don't think about my gender. And so that kind of helps push me along if I'm ever feeling, for whatever reason, that I'm inadequate or, struggling with something, males have and females have picked me back up and helped me get through that. So I think surrounding yourself with people, and that's, just a good life advice in general. I think surround yourself with people that make you feel good about yourself and that challenge you to be a better person.
I completely agree. And I would also say that, like, do your best to not get bitter. It's like really easy for a lot of us to take in any sort of like sexism or racism or whatever it is, and to then turn it around and like only hurt ourselves by not playing the drums or not taking the job or not going back in to say, you know what you said was messed up. And here's how you need to say it to me next time. And I want to play drums for you. Like, to try your very best to not take things personally, even though it's obviously very personal. But like, we're not in a great place currently in the world. So we do have to fight for ourselves. There are advocates out there for us, but also fight for yourself, just go one more time back into that room and like, just try to work with people to make your life better. And I know that's very difficult, but that would be my piece of advice, is not to let things get you down, to just try to bounce back up again and keep going, because it will get better at some point.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I struggle with that all the time. If someone says something that, I'm in a situation where I would just politely exit the situation rather than say something. And then I'll, think about it later or right after and be like, I should have said something. I totally should have said something. That happens to me a lot. And I'm really trying to get better about that, because that is a way to kind of stir the pot and to hopefully eventually affect change, is by talking about it with people who are in opposite viewpoints of you. Rather than just, agreeing with everything. I struggle with that. I struggle with that a lot, because the easy way is to just ignore it. But the only way for things to get better is to address it.
It's really easy to ignore it or to be angry, to like leave and be angry.
That too.
And like what we need to do is all tell each other more about just like how we're feeling, and be open to people changing or listening, or not changing right away, but changing later. And just progress is made in really, really curious ways, and also often very slowly, and often there's, sort of backtracking and then forward moving. And so being patient with yourself and the people around you as you push forward in your drumming career, I'd say.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Thanks. Thank you for having me on this show. This has been a really fun.
Of course.
Yeah, sure. You're welcome. Man, Mindy Abovitz, you're a kick-ass human being. This is just really awesome what you're doing. And it's just so, I don't know, it's so generous of you to do this for everyone. And you're doing something for men, I have to say, also, because, we all want, we all want more women drummers as well.
Well, I'm always looking for more help in the magazine. If anyone wants to get involved ever, spreading the word and writing and photographing and all of that. And I'm super open to advice and feedback from everybody on what we could be doing better within the magazine to grow this industry, to make it better all around.
Awesome.
Thanks. Ben says thanks. He actually had to run, but he says thanks so much. And yeah, guys, I guess we'll catch you on episode 120. Thanks, Megan. And
sounds good. Yep.
Thanks so much, Mindy.
Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Take care.
Bye. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Cool. I think we got it. It's so funny. Everyone always says bye like the same way, but we never like plan it.
Bye.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, like that's how it always is. And
Really?
Yeah, it's great.
I'm excited to listen back to this. That was a really fun conversation. I like your segments. It's so cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I thought that was an excellent episode. Man, we could have easily made that a two-parter. I feel like there was so much more about your stuff we could have got to easily.
Well, yeah. I'm around. If you wanted to cycle back like in a year or less, you just let me know. I'm around.
Yeah, certainly. I'm sure we will. This, we plan on continuing. So, yeah.
Another addresses too, and I'll send you magazines. I'll send you subscriptions just so you have it. You can like dialogue with me about what we're actually working, like,
oh, thanks,
back and forth. And if there's something that we're not doing that you think we should be doing,
sure.
Let me know.
Yeah, man, thanks. I mean, just looking at what you've done in this short time, it's been, obviously you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's called my gut instinct that I follow all the time.
That's good.
I can.
Yeah. Well, this should be out in about 2 weeks.
Awesome.
I think we're about on our regular 2-week schedule.
We'll put it on blast whenever you send it over. We'll get it out into the world.
Oh,
That'd be
cool.
great.
Thanks.
Thank
Will
you.
do.
Yeah, we'll tag you.
Fine. Yeah. Yes, and keep in touch with me. I'm around.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah,
Cool.
thanks. We'll do.
So I'm going to
Thanks,
head out.
Mindy.